Hey there, Amanda from the Happy Homestead. Today is an exciting day. We are going to learn about inoculating your own logs to grow your own shiitake mushrooms. So we're going to touch on 4 things before we head outside. Number 1, why, the place where you can go get more resources, how, and the tools needed. So let's start with the why. Why grow your own mushrooms? Why not? It's extremely cost effective. Buying cultivated mushrooms in the grocery store can actually be very costly. And if you put that effort in up front at home, you'll actually get yields, a lot of yield of productive mushrooms over years from your logs. The other reason is mushrooms are healthy and delicious. They add that really great earthy and meaty texture to dishes depending upon how you cook them, but they're also packed with micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. The other reason I would suggest is because they can become shelf stable. If you grow your own mushrooms, you can then dehydrate them at home and keep them for a very long time. I have a half-gallon mason jar here of shiitakes that I have grown over the past couple of years. I dry them out thoroughly in the dehydrator, and then I just keep them in this jar in the pantry. And when I need some, I pull them out, rehydrate them in water for maybe an hour or 2, and then use them as I would any other mushroom. It works out great. So now let's get to the resources. I have learned a lot of my mushrooming techniques from Field and Forest. Now, there are a lot of other companies out there. I just don't have experience with them. So I'm gonna speak specifically about Field and Forest for this video. And we're only gonna talk about shiitakes. There are other mushroom spores and other types of mushrooms that you can grow, but we're gonna focus on shiitakes today because number 1, that's what I'm working with. And number 2, that is a very good beginner mushroom to start with. So I got a lot of my tools and my spawn at Field and Forest. And I'll make sure I have a link down in the show notes of where that website is and how you can get all those resources as well. So now let's talk about the how. How do you do it? Well, with the magic of video editing, you're gonna see this timeline over a matter of minutes. But really, it takes a little bit of thought and a little work in the beginning ahead of time. So 13 days ago, my mom and I set out to the woods and we cut down a sweet gum log. Now, I need to stop and just preface, this was private property that we had permission to cut this tree down. Do not go cut a random tree down in someone's yard or what you think is just woods and doesn't belong to someone because it might come back to bite you. Make sure that you have a place to cut your tree down with the right and proper permission to do so. Okay, so we cut our tree down 13 days ago. I cut it then into 2.5 to 3 foot logs, brought them home and put them in our backyard. And so they've just been sitting out there for the last 13 days waiting to be inoculated. And so when you do that, you're cutting your tree down and you're letting it sit for about 2 weeks. Now, why do we do this? It's because you want some of the moisture of the tree to leave, but not so much that the mycelium can't actually be productive and colonize within the wood. So the 2-week mark is that sweet spot. The other reason is you cut down a fresh tree. You do not want to go find a tree that's already on the ground floor of the woods in the forest and use that. And the reason is because, number 1, the moisture, you don't know how long it's been there. And number 2, you could be competing with other mycelium and fungus. And you don't want to do that. If you're going to go to this trouble, you want to make sure that you actually have success. So don't be taking a random log that you find in the woods somewhere or on the side of the road. Okay, now, as far as why did I choose sweet gum? Well, I'll link down, but Field and Forest has a really good graphical representation as far as what mushroom you want to grow and then what type of wood would work well. And there's always multiple options. It's never just a one choice, right? There's like an average, there's a good, a best, a better, superior kind of thing. And so shiitake grows very well on oak. I have some oak logs that I inoculated about 1.5 years ago, and they're just now starting to flush, but even so, it's not as productive as I would like. Now let me stress, that is because these are, first of all, big oak logs. So it's rather large in diameter. It takes a while for the mycelium to really colonize within the wood. Oak, however, is superior for mushroom growing, especially shiitake, and the reason is because it is a denser wood and it's going to give you a longer life of production. So the log should theoretically last multiple years and give you high yields. I have also done sweet gum in the past, and I had really great success with that. It's a softer wood, and so it doesn't take as long for the mycelium to colonize. However, the production of the logs will tap out at a couple of years, whereas the oak may go longer. I'm choosing gum because I had great success with it. I'm inoculating at least once a year, so I constantly have that flow of logs out there with mushrooms growing, so I don't really have a dead spot within the timeline. If you have access to oak and someone doesn't mind you cutting down their oak tree, then by all means try that. You just don't ever want to get a tree that's really big around in circumference. Number one, those logs are very heavy. Number two, it's going to take a very long time, if at all, for the mycelium to be strong enough to really get through that wood. Okay, so now let's talk about the tools that we need, right? So we're talked a little bit about the how, we're gonna go into the tools in conjunction with the how. So you need a few things, right? You need your logs. They've been sitting for a couple of weeks. The other most important thing you need is your spawn. And so again, all of my shiitake spawn is from Field and Forest. This is the West Wind strain, and you'll see different strains on their website for cool weather, warm weather, and then they have one that's a little bit more universal. So I've done West Wind, and I've done, I think, R46 is another one that I've done and had success with. You basically get your spawn, right? You need that, and there's a couple of different kinds of spawn. There's sawdust spawn, which is what this is. Right, so it's actually, the shiitake spawn is within the sawdust. You see the white here. The white is actually the mycelium colonizing within the sawdust. They also have plug spawn, which almost looks a little bit like a dowel. And so you drill your hole into the log and you just plug that in. I did that my first year. I did not have success. I believe that is fully on me and not the plug spawn. I just knew that I wanted to try the sawdust, and I've had a little more success with that. The other thing you're gonna need is a drill. And so I have a drill that I purchased from Field and Forest. It's a high-speed drill, and it was modified. It's an angle grinder. So this is the box, right? It's an angle grinder that was modified from Field and Forest to do the high-speed holes into your log. Guys, I can't recommend this tool enough. The very first year I did this, I took just one of our old drills, charged battery, a brand new drill bit, and tried to go to town and get those holes drilled. Oh my goodness. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience because it was not strong enough. We're talking about some pretty hard and dense wood, right? And to have to go and drill up to maybe 1,000 holes, it just wasn't working well. That was the year I also did the plugs. So that's probably why I've had little to no success that year, is because of the drill. So the next year I bought this angle grinder with a 12.5 millimeter drill bit, also from Field and Forest. This is a brand new one that I have. So you can get that as well. And it's so easy. You'll see when I go outside, you just plug it in, so it's not a battery. You need to plug it in, and then you go zip, 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 zip. You like that? And you literally do your holes. Now you do your holes in what I'm doing like a diamond pattern. So, so there'd be 2 holes, and then the next row, it'd be the opposite, like up in the corner, right? And so it's a constant diamond pattern throughout the log, every 2-3-ish inches apart. And again, I'll show you how I do that. And then once all your holes are drilled, then you're actually going to get the spawn into those holes. And so my first year, I had this inoculation tool. It's like it's called a thumb tool or a palm tool. And the reason is because you can press it with your thumb or your palm. So what happens is you put all your spawn, you empty it into a bowl, and you actually then put this in the bowl, right? So kind of like jam the spawn on up in here, and then you put it onto the log on top of the hole, and you press it down. And so when you press it down, right, it presses the spawn into the hole. I'll tell you, I used this for a few years and it works, but my thumb and my palm got very sore. I mean, for a couple of days after. It works. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it, because that was a really great introductory tool to inoculate with. Last year, I bought something else. So Field & Forest has a direct relationship and partnership with a company out of Japan, where the shiitake is from, called Okuda. And so I bought an Okuda inoculation tool. I've only used it one time last fall, and I'll be using it again today, but so far I love it. So same principle is that in here is where the spawn goes, right? So you've got it in your bowl, you just kind of shove it in, and then you then put this on top of the hole on your log and press down. And you actually can get 2 or 3 holes done in one stuffing of the spawn. So you don't have to keep going back, right? You can actually stuff it and then go on 3 different holes. And in this one, you're holding in your grip and pushing down. So it's a little bit more ergonomically comfortable, and that's why I bought it. I do like that. Okay, so you've got your angle grinder to drill the holes. You've got your spawn to plug the holes, and you've got your tool to actually plug the holes with the spawn. The last thing you need is wax. And you can buy the wax again from Field & Forest, or you can use beeswax if you have access to that. And so we have the wax, and I have them in the crock pot. It's an old crock pot that I think my mom had and she gave me, and now I use it for that. So a few hours before I'm going to start inoculating, I'll get the crock pot going on low and melt that wax. You will then also need a dauber. And so basically, it's gonna have like a metal handle here with a cotton ball, a little bit firmer than a cotton ball on the tip. And you'll dip this into the wax and you'll seal the holes with the spawn in it. Now there's a couple of reasons you do this. Number one, you wanna make sure that the spawns stay in and don't come out through weather, squirrels, bugs, etc. But also making sure nothing else gets in. Right? So you don't want the spawn to come out and you don't want anything else coming in. So you seal those holes shut with the wax. Then you just go stack your logs out in the backyard. And so I have them out in the back. You don't want them out blatantly in a sunny area, especially in the heat of the summer. In a shady place, but access to all of the elements, especially the moisture, rain, snow, etc. You never want to cover your logs so much that they don't keep moisture. The moisture is what helps the mushrooms really be productive and colonize throughout the wood. So you don't want to put a tarp on top of it. You don't want to put it out in the middle of the sun, right? As if it were in the natural environment of the forest floor, out in the forest, out in the woods, with some shade in the tree cover. Okay, so before we head outside, a couple more things I want to mention. The spawn that I've purchased, I bought it probably about a week ago. And so when you're purchasing from the Field & Forest website, you can actually select when you want it to ship. You can say ASAP, which is what I did because I had already cut my tree down. Or if you're planning to cut your tree, say this coming weekend, you can actually request it to ship a week from now or 10 days from now, right? So that you get it and it's no problem. Now, the spores will last a little while. So as soon as you get them, you're gonna wanna keep them in your refrigerator. I actually have a bag in our refrigerator from last fall. They can last up to 6 months as long as they're kept in the fridge, they're kept cool, and you're not introducing any other moisture, right? It's in the bag. So I'm gonna start with those first, but I bought more just in case I needed it. I have 9 logs outside that you'll see. 2 of them I don't know that I'm gonna do. They're really loaded with lichen. Not that that makes a difference from what I understand, but they're also not a huge circumference diameter. So while that may mean it's easier, I just don't know that I'm gonna do those yet. That's gonna be a decision, a game time decision out there. but there are 7 other logs that we're gonna do. And so I'm gonna basically do it in like an assembly line process. Now, if you have someone to help you, this goes a lot faster. It's just me today, but that's okay. So I am first going to drill all the holes in all of the logs. Then I'm gonna do all of the inoculation in all of the logs, and then I'm gonna wax all of the logs and then go stack them, and I'm done. And so once your inoculation is done, so with these, it's January, there's sweet gum, I would expect my first flush probably this fall, October-ish, November-ish. And then I would expect them to flush again at least 2 more times next year. And you can do force fruiting and force flushing by soaking them in cold water. Whole nother day, whole nother video. But you can do more to make them be more productive. You just don't ever want to do it too much that it spends out the wood and the mycelium. So it's got to be a cadence to that. But these should start flushing hopefully this fall. The other thing I want to notice is I'm going to be wearing protective eyeglasses. When you're using the angle grinder to drill your holes, sawdust is going to, like the spirals and sawdust is going to come flying up. So make sure you have eye protection. I'm not going to be doing too much or any talking while I'm doing this because it can get very loud. I want you to focus on watching the action and what I'm doing, and you can ask questions through the comments and whatnot, but I'm not going to do too much talking outside because it can get pretty loud. Okay, I think I've covered the basics. If I think of anything else, I'll make sure to mention it afterwards. But if you have any questions, feel free to write them out and I'll make sure I can answer them best I can. But let's head outside and let's get this inoculation going. Last one. we did it. Okay, so all logs are done. I ended up doing all 9 logs because I thought, I'm here, why not? Just do it. Start to finish, setup, drilling the holes, inoculation, waxing, moving the logs to their spot, and tear down all together about 2.5 hours. The longest part was the inoculation, just making sure that the spores were really in all of the holes all the way down. There were, most of the time I had to pump each hole more than once, even with the Okuda tool. It's just the way it is. But all in all, I'm pretty pleased. So I will do some follow-up videos on how to care for your logs, how to force fruiting, etc. But at this point, really, they just get stacked and left. And wait 6 months or so, and hopefully have some success. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, let me know. Please hit the subscribe button. I appreciate all the support. Thank you so much. Stay healthy, stay well. See you next time.